Welcome to the Tabletop Gaming Magazine podcast. I'm Chris Eggett, the editor of the magazine, and today I'm joined by Tristan Hall, creator of favourites like Gloom of Kilforth and Shadow of Kilforth and the upcoming Veilwraith. We're going to talk about solo games today. Hi Tristan.
Hello sir, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you, yes. Yeah. Would you like to introduce yourself to the fine
Certainly.
listeners?
Sure. Well, I am Tristan Hall, as you say, of Hall or Nothing Productions is my company, and we've been publishing board games since 2017, so we're quite new, but in a sense been a geek for my entire 40-odd years, so very qualified in that respect. And we've had a few successful Kickstarters under our belt. We're about to launch our 8th later this summer, and we've got various games on the boat or being delivered to backers or available for sale right now. And yeah, and I'm a big proponent of solo gaming, so I'm looking forward to this chat.
Yeah. So, shall we start with the really obvious question that almost doesn't need answering, but I think a lot of people do struggle with the concept generally, which is, what is solo gaming?
Right. Okay. Solo gaming is using games and components to play by yourself in an acceptable manner for any length of time, and dates back hundreds of years. If you look at the card game Patience, which has been around since 1700s, I think, and it's just a way of occupying your time and sort of employing your creative brain to do what we all are designed to do as human beings, which is to play. So gaming obviously has moved on leaps and bounds, and very much over the past 20 years, 30 years, solo gaming has taken off in a bigger way until recently on platforms like Kickstarter. Pretty much every other game has a solo rule set now. And if you look at the solo sort of game groups on places like Board Game Geek, the One Player Guild, which is an entire guild devoted to people who play games solitaire, is now the biggest guild on Board Game Geek, bigger than the Dice Tower Network guild. So it's had a huge sort of lease of life, or been given a new breath of life in recent years, and that's great for people like me who play a lot of solo games. And people play solo games for a huge amount of reasons. It might not just be because you got no friends. It might be because you work odd shifts, or you live out in the middle of nowhere, or you're learning a game before you want to introduce it to your mates in the next game night. A whole variety of reasons, but it's certainly one of my favourite pastimes.
Yeah.
And I find as well, when I'm designing a game, having a compelling solo rule set is a great sort of way to play test it. You know, you don't always need people around it. If you decide to set up a game at midnight or 2 a.m. or whatever, you can just crack on and get down to it. So I try to ensure that all of our games at least have a solo option where available.
I mean, I think a lot of people have been kind of forced into solo gaming recently because of the whole lockdown. The lockdown, and things like that. So there's a lot of people who have, you know, usually they have a normal, I say a normal game night. See, every time we talk about solo game, we have to sort of couch it in sort of explaining ourselves somehow. And obviously that's completely unfair, because it's actually, because once you've done it once, you realise it's actually quite good.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people have been looking at their collections and looking for the magical, 1 to 4 rather than
2 to 5,
2 to 5, or even worse, 3 plus anything. Because it's just
that's a big ask.
Yeah. I don't think many 3 plus games have been released in the recent months for that reason. So people have sort of been coming to it because of the sort of enforced lockdown. I think people have been kind of like discovering it as a thing to do as a sort of a way to hold on to their hobby despite the lack of having these big groups that you normally have. So
it's almost like it's validated it more for people who wouldn't ordinarily be inclined to play solo games.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole argument that print and play has also had a little resurgence because of that as well, which is all super interesting. But so why do we like it?
Why do we like it?
Yeah.
Because it ticks all those boxes that I mentioned earlier about fulfilling your creativity, and it's puzzle solving as well. You know, it's working your way through a riddle, and you're the only person there who's able to control and own that experience. And they vary. Solo games vary hugely on whether or not they're sort of a more dry kind of Euro type game where you're managing a farm or something like that. So certainly there's a huge resurgence now in narrative board games which tell a story, and as much as reading a book tells you a story, games offer that experience as well. But you're the hero of the story. You're playing it and experiencing it firsthand, and that's a hugely exciting option. Certainly for people like me who grew up in the 80s reading fighting fantasy game books or choose your own adventure books, and having that sort of interactive literature experience. And so the whole run of board gaming from Euro to thematic games is covered by solo games as well. And it might just be a puzzly card game that takes 10 minutes to play through that you can play 10 times in a row, or it might be a big meaty miniatures on dudes on a map type experience that takes hours to play through a single game. But the whole range of games available now are being converted in some way to solo games. And people don't bat an eyelid at playing a video game solo, and yet there's still, although less and less so, there is a sort of kind of a stigma attached to, you play games by yourself, you must have no friends. Certainly that's something that I experienced early on, maybe 10, 20 years ago when I first started getting into board gaming forums online and stuff, and I'd be the guy going, I've developed these solo rules for Descent Journeys in the Dark, and people would be like, why do you need to play solo? Just get some friends, dude, and stuff like that. And slowly that sort of mentality is kind of phasing out more and more. And as you say, people who weren't ordinarily maybe necessarily inclined to play solo games are being given that option in a way they never have before because of the quarantine, because of the lockdown. And I liked the way you phrased it. It's sort of keeping your hobby alive, because if you insisted on never playing a solo game and you were in lockdown and you couldn't hang out with your buddies, they'd all just be sitting on a shelf, and the closest thing you could do is read rule books, rather than experiencing actual games, breaking them open and getting stuck in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think people have a kind of, one of the questions is, how do you play them as well, isn't it? I think a lot of people, because you touched on a few things there. You touched on the adventure sort of stuff, and then there's sort of the puzzly stuff, and that is really kind of that Eurogame split there with the sort of adventure games. And the way I mostly play these games is I will set them up, and then I'll keep coming back to them like it's some sort of like buffet that I've left out for myself.
Nice.
But obviously that's because I've got the availability, a little bit of space to do that.
I was going to say, you're lucky to have that space. You don't have to clear it away to put the tea out or the dinner.
No. I mean, I'm very, very lucky to have a space where I can leave review games out for more than the play period. But yeah, so that allows me to sort of play those adventure games over a long period of time. So we talked very briefly before the call about Dungeon Degenerates, which is one of my favourite sort of weird adventure games, where you move around a map, you make lots of little decisions about whether you're attacking something or not. Some events happen, you change loads of things on the map, everything gets more dangerous, and you might overcome the thing you want to overcome, you might not, but in the end it probably doesn't matter anyway, because you're going to get to the end of your quest for that day, say, and then there's a multiple choice depending on what you actually achieved, and so you have this whole like narrative experience that you kind of spoke about, and then the other side of it is things like Expedition to Newdale, which is part of the Oh My Good series, and that's the Eurogamey. We're going to move tokens about a lot, and I'm going to do some engine building, and then I'm going to look at the score at the end that I've got and realise I've failed to get the right amount of wheat, actually. But I think that's right. I think these are the main ways we actually play them, don't we? You sit down and you open them as a puzzle, or you open them as a narrative experience. I think that's kind of it, isn't it?
Quite.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the rules there as well, and making your own rules. And I think that probably ties into how you got into solo gaming in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So my elder brother and sister did not share my passion for board games growing up, and that was most likely due to their experience of it being games like Monopoly and Game of Life and things like that, which aren't entirely 100% satisfying experiences, whereas I was always drawn to just the covers. The Waddington games in the 80s used to have these gorgeous illustrations like Lost Valley of the Dinosaurs and Escape from Atlantis, and these beautifully produced thematic games, which were all multiple player, of course. And so maybe on Christmas Day I could convince the family to play with me, but in between times, you know, and certainly if I wasn't out playing with my mates or climbing trees or whatever, it was developing rules for these games so that I could play them alone, or racing, you know, just playing it as written and trying my best to play either side, which is never as satisfying, you know, like playing a competitive game and like playing chess against yourself sort of thing. So when a game called Hero Quest came along when I was about 11 or 12, it absolutely blew my mind wide open, because it was everything I'd ever wanted, this huge fantasy dungeon crawling experience. And so one of the earliest things I did with that game was develop a whole rule set that allowed you to play it alone, you know, and take one adventure into the dungeon and have experiences between adventures and go to town and meet people and all kinds of stuff. And looking back on that, that seems like it's almost a part of my training to become a game designer in the end. I never considered it as such growing up, and I read interviews even as recently as, you know, just a few years ago about game designers who'd say, oh yes, I've been designing games since I was a kid and stuff, and I would be like, that's amazing, you know, that they've had that sort of wherewithal to produce a fully fledged game. And then sort of thought, yeah, I guess maybe I sort of fall into that category in a way, you know. And because it was like tinkering with somebody else's game, it never felt like I'd designed my own game sort of thing, you know. It was just messing about with other people's rule sets. But that's as vital, picking apart somebody else's game and learning about how it works and the mechanics of it, to developing your own games as any other skill set. So yeah, kind of being forced into playing alone as a kid certainly gave rise to those experiences, wanting to play with these beautiful games that I'd been given as presents or whatever, but not having people around 24 hours a day to play them with. So yeah, and I guess I've sort of, like most teenage boys, moved away from that as I got on in my years, and, you know, went to university and all that kind of stuff, but then rediscovered a huge desire to get back into hobbies and gaming and stuff once I got married and settled down and got a house and child and everything, and so gaming was, you know, came back to me in a big way, and seeing how far they'd come and moved on, and how many new versions of Hero Quest there are, you know, was smashing. It was like this brilliant experience of like, wow, I've got so much catching up to do, and so got to 20 years later and now publishing my own games, trying to recapture those experiences and share them on, like my own version of them, my own experiences of them.
That's really cool. I think we've all done a little bit of that in our childhood, that sort of mucking about, tinkering with a game, so I in the upcoming issue we've got a little piece on I think it's I'm going to say it wrong now. I think it's Thunder Road, which is a Milton Bradley Mad Max style racing game.
Yeah,
I looked it up and I thought, you know, I think I made this game when I was a kid. I think I made this game with like Warhammer 40k like bikes and things. You know,
nice.
I'm pretty sure I made this game. But I think we've all had like some little version or house ruling thing that's gone a bit far, and we've suddenly
even as far as every family plays Monopoly a different way.
Yes,
and the free parking space means different things to every single family that ever plays it, practically, you know. And you develop almost a sort of literacy. I guess if it was cinema, they call it cine literacy, where you become almost subconsciously aware of different types of game mechanics and the sort of meta of playing different types of games. And in a way, as gamers, we're all qualified to one degree or another to design games because of the experiences that we've had playing so blooming many of them.
Maybe it's time now to get a top 5.
Nice. Everybody loves top 5s.
Yeah.
And everybody understands that they vary from one day to the next. And be rewritten.
No one's allowed themselves to be pinned down just yet, as actually saying it's their top 5. So what have we got a top 5 of?
Top 5 solo games?
That's a good idea. That's great.
It came to me.
The Tabletop Gaming Game Store is open and dispatching orders worldwide. Visit www.tabletopgaming.co.uk to read the reviews and buy the games directly from us.
Cool. So do you want to kick us off with your, I'm going to say 5, but...
Sure, we start at the bottom slot.
Yeah, as it were.
Although, you know what, any of these games could occupy any of the top 5 slots for me. But I'll start off with Kingdom Death Monster.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
And the reason it's not further up the list is purely because of my inability to play it right now. Like we moved house and half the house is completely out of bounds, and so there's no way I could even set up this monster of a game right now. It's a huge table hog and it's gorgeous, and once you set it up, it's going to stay set up for weeks. So it's one of those that's, you can't really come to it in bite-sized morsels. You have to sort of deep dive into it and spend a good few hours just to see any progress. But it's absolutely the ultimate, for me, example of a Kickstarter board game where one guy has just taken a crazy idea, been given the cash to completely run with it with no input from a publishing company or anything like that, and has been able to produce a game that's would almost through traditional publishing be unsellable. But because of the unique nature of Kickstarter and the huge, overwhelming support that he had, and sort of busting open all the records on Kickstarter, he's been able to go away and produce a game that is absolutely lavish. The miniatures are some of the best in the world. The world building is insane. It's really compelling. And it's kind of 3 games in one. You have a bunch of dudes chasing a big monster around a map and trying to kill it. You have the hunt for that monster, which is an experience in itself. And then after you've beaten the monster and ripped its entrails out and taken its fur and everything, you go back to town and you use those resources to build your town and make your characters more powerful, give them better weapons and tools. And it's got a bit of pretty much every aspect of gaming that I enjoy. And it does it all in a very unique, very wild, very swingy sort of way, but very enjoyable nonetheless. It's all about rolling d10s, and if you get a 1, you're dead, and that kind of thing. And if you get a 10, brilliant, you probably did something really cool. But that's oversimplifying. It's obviously a huge experience, like narrative game, and I love it. I'd play it way more often if I had the opportunity to.
Do you? Okay. Have you? Can I ask the silly question, which is kind of the I think we could call it the Gloomhaven question, couldn't we? Which is, have you finished it?
Hell no. Well, no, that's not true. Actually, we did. We had a group play of a campaign, which petered out to a total wipeout later on by the monsters. We lost every villager in the campaign, and I restarted it solo and managed to play through and get to the final boss and then get wiped out. So not a successful conclusion yet, but I'm sure there's one in the pipeline for me. Yeah. But it just takes so long to get to that point. You really have to commit like 30 or 50 hours of gaming to it. And one day when I've got a man cave and my board gaming space all set up, I'll just leave it out for weeks and batter it. It's a dream. It's a pipe dream at the moment.
Yeah. And also, do you have a favourite monster?
Oh gosh, they're all so cleverly and creatively designed. I've got a kind of masochistic love-hate relationship with the ones where the first time you play against them, they annihilate you completely because there's a trick to fight, like the Butcher or the Kingsman, and you come up against it and you're like, right, okay, we're going to do this thing that worked on the last couple of monsters, and all of a sudden it's like, nope, and throws you a curveball. And you almost have to die to realize how you beat it the next time around. And I think there's something kind of compelling about that way. You're like, right, it would either turn you off completely and make you think the game's impossible, or in that sort of Dark Souls, Bloodborne style, make you, I can do this. I just need to keep going at it. So, probably one of those, dude.
I was about to say, is the game that I think I would recommend to like Dark Souls fans the most.
Yeah.
If they can, afford it, because it's an expensive game. It's $450 or something. Like
I
that.
was lucky enough to get it way back on the original Kickstarter when it was, I guess, probably $100 or $150 or
Oh
something
wow.
like that. So to see the prices it goes for now is just, that's a huge investment. But people clearly have the money because it's been so
Yeah,
successful.
it keeps selling out, so it's clearly uh, it's clearly going to keep some people happy for a long time. Cool. Shall we go for number 4?
Uh, well, following our discussion, then I guess it's appropriate that the next game is Dark Souls, the card game,
Oh, very good. Okay.
and this ties in to my recent rediscovery of Dark Souls, the video game. I guess that's been a huge influence. My son is not really old enough to play it, but he's dead curious about like watching playthroughs of Dark Souls. So we have had some sessions where I've fired up the PlayStation and played a few levels of it, and he sat and watched it with me and kind of got into it. So it's and that's probably the third run through of Dark Souls. Bear in mind, I never replay video games, but there's something about the From Software games like Dark Souls and Bloodborne. It's just has you coming back to them in a yeah. But that's a whole separate thing. So Dark Souls, the card game, obviously based on the video game, has all the same lore, and Steamforged, who produced it, they're kind of local lads, Manchester lads who produced the Dark Souls board game as well. Made this huge sort of miniatures board game of it, which I really enjoyed actually. But it was another one like Kingdom Death. It's a huge kind of slug to set up, and a great game once you have set it up and once you've committed your time to it. But Dark Souls, the card game, pares all of that experience down into just a deck builder, which you can set up in 5 minutes and play through in half an hour, which is absolutely perfect. And for me, certainly. And it's a really lovely implementation. It does a couple of things that other deck builders don't really do. It's kind of like a spin on deck builders, but it's also filled with all of the art and the atmosphere of Dark Souls, the difficulty, the different bosses. Each boss has its own AI deck. Again, very similar to Kingdom Death. In fact, I'm certain that the Dark Souls card game wouldn't have existed without, pillaging the Kingdom Death monster AI decks. But of course, that's the great thing about gaming these days is that everybody gets to build on the designs that have gone before. And so the Dark Souls card game just offers a very much more pared down experience of Dark Souls that you can play through in half an hour. It's a really good multiplayer game as well, but it allows you to play solo as one hero, which is one of my favorites. Kingdom Death Monster, you have to run 4 heroes to even have a chance. Whereas Dark Souls, a card game, you don't need to be managing multiple decks. You can just jump in, shuffle, and recreate that video game experience as one character, which I think is great. There's so many solo games out there that say 1 to 4 players or, offer a solo experience, and all you have to do is play as though there were 3 people there and be all of those people. And I always find that really frustrating. I find that like quite a turn off, even just 2 characters, just because you want to. And again, this probably comes from reading fantasy books growing up, but you want to inhabit a character when you're playing a thematic game, or I want to. And so I much prefer games that offer you the chance to do that rather than managing whole parties of people.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that. Certainly, I've recently played the Sandy Peterson Planet Apocalypse.
Oh yes,
I played that solo, and that's one where you have to have at least a couple of heroes. To play it, and it's not too bad because it's like kind of a big dice chucky sort of. It's kind of, I'm going to say this, and it sounds like I'm being mean about it, but it's kind of a stupid game, but stupid in the way that like heavy metal's stupid. As in, so it's by which I mean it's really good. But I was disappointed to know that they've got these very complex, interesting characters, but I have to play 2 of them. And that's because a lot of the gameplay relies on teamwork. But sadly I couldn't. There wasn't a way to pare it down so that I could maybe win as a single hero. That was a slight disappointment for me because, as you say, you want to really follow through on like this hero story in some way.
I think it also maybe to use the word stupid, that kind of applies to me in terms of playing characters. I don't want to run too many characters. I don't want to have to think too hard about all the different options and synergies. And there are games where that really works, like or that is essential to it, like Gloomhaven, where you have to play at least 2 heroes. I think there are solo scenarios for Gloomhaven if you sort of get far enough along, but that requires you having one particular type, maybe a big fighter and a quick thiefy or magic user type, and how you synergize between them is crucial to solving each level's puzzle kind of thing. So I understand that some games can't offer that option, but the ones that do certainly for me feel more compelling. And similarly with a lot of the Automa type solo rule sets that like Jamie Stegmaier's team specialize in for games like Scythe and Viticulture and stuff, the ones that offer you the experience of playing against an opponent rather than having to manage that opponent are great for me. I really enjoy them. So you play Scythe solo and it feels like you're playing against an opponent because you don't have to micromanage every single thing that it does. You just flip a card and it sort of emulates the experience of what another player would do without you having to, delve down into the minutiae of what that entails and doing all the accounting, the bookkeeping.
I think that's so just if there's any game designers listening who want to do a solo mode, the best thing I think you can possibly do with your cardboard villain that you're creating is to make them cheat.
Yes.
If they can cheat, and first of all, it makes them an interesting character. Some like villagers, you can play that solo. There's the countess in that, and she's really nasty, and it's kind of a class warfare thing by the time you can sort of internalize it all. But she cheats, and that means you don't have to do any maths for her, and that means the worst solo games there's so few of them, it's rude for me to mention any, so I won't. But the worst solo games are the ones where you are asked to shuffle tokens about for the entire playthrough, do lots of maths, and then for the benefit of a final number that may or may not be satisfying to you in any way. And so any game where you're endlessly having to move tokens about for no reason, when you could have just skipped forward to the sort of satisfying conclusion of that action. I think that's always something to cut out for young game designers out there.
Definitely. You want the player to be playing more than handling the AI.
Exactly.
And I know there's one game that I really enjoy. I'm not going to name it because of this, but it has you play a turn, and then the AI turn is probably 3 or 4 times longer. And then back to your player turn, you get to do one thing, and then the AI turn, and it's just like this. It's too heavily weighted. It needs to be the other way around. You need to be doing stuff and enjoying stuff, and then the game sort of does something nice. Maybe just not easy or simple, but something that's quick to resolve.
Yeah, exactly.
That elevates the situation for you. Yeah.
Sorry, should we go for number 3?
Number 3, certainly. Okay. And again, this could probably easily occupy the number 1 spot, but probably is due to the amount of time that I get to play it these days, which is not as much as I would like, is the Lord of the Rings, the card game from Fantasy Flight, which was just absolutely blew my mind when it arrived because it's my favorite IP in the world. The artwork is absolutely gorgeous. The component quality is Fantasy Flight, so it's top notch. And you can play it solo, although, again, you have to be 3 characters mostly. So, and going back to the tinkering thing, one of the first things I did when this game came out is develop my own scenarios for it, because it came with 3 in the box. Everybody played those 3, and then we were all waiting for the next expansion to come out. And that was going to be a few months, and we played it to death in that time. So I designed some fan-made scenarios for it, including one that gave you this tantalizing offer that's in the rule book of being able to play as one hero, which if you did against the rule book, like the scenarios that came with the game, you just die. You had to have 3 heroes. So I developed a scenario where you could play as one hero. But even that cheats a little bit, because at some point you unlock a second hero. But at least you set out in the idea of inhabiting one character. But yeah, it just recaptures the flavor of the books beautifully. It's got quotes of Tolkien's all over the game. The scenarios are really clever and interestingly designed, and there's a billion expansion packs, so it's a massive money sink if you're so inclined to follow it, as I was and am, to the point where now I have over 1,000 cards. I don't even know. It's thousands of cards probably. And if you're playing it every month, as soon as like the next expansion comes out, you can keep up with that. You can tweak your deck as you go. You can stay on top of the power creep and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if you're like me and you just want to have it and then dip into it occasionally, when you play those later scenarios, they are wildly going to crucify your deck that you made to tackle the 3 basic quests or whatever. So in that respect, I don't get enough time to construct decks to play against it. There are brilliant online resources from other gamers who've uploaded their own decks, some of them thematic, some of them just monster powerful decks. So you can, if you don't have the time, you can just jump on and grab somebody else's deck list and play. But it's one of the most creative, interesting, and satisfying games in my collection for sure. And the fact that you can have a really fun and really deep experience playing it solo is why it will always be in my top list.
I really like that all of these, this included, all of these solo games include like a huge amount of community.
Yes. Which is ironic, right? Because, you'd think that everybody would just be these sort of parceled off, isolated individuals playing by themselves solo games.
Yeah, solo hermits or whatever. But it's not true. It's not true. It's a huge community of people. As you say, the one-player guild is massive.
Definitely. And the feedback on those fan-made scenarios that I designed was definitely a huge stepping stone in my own development as a game designer, because they had like thousands of downloads and lots of really positive remarks. And then when I launched my own first game, a lot of the people said, "Oh, we're here because you did those Lord of the Rings scenarios. So we thought if you could do that, you might be able to do your own game as well." So that was it was a really good launching point. And also, I was a playtester in the early cycles of the Lord of the Rings card game, and that was, for me, it was brilliant. Sort of peek behind the scenes at how my idols did it, my favorite game designers did it, and then I had my own sort of starstruck moment last year when I went to Gen Con and met Caleb Grace, who's one of the lead designers of Lord of the Rings card game, and I was like, no way, and it's like fanboying all over him. But he was a really lovely guy, and it was great because we'd communicated online 10 years ago quite frequently about playtesting certain cycles, and then to actually finally meet him and tell him what a legend he is was a fantastic opportunity.
Oh, that's very sweet. Okay, shall we move on to number 2?
Certainly. Okay, and this is a game that tops tons of solo gaming lists, and it's Mage Knight, the board game.
Yes, it is on nearly every list. It's impossible.
And with good reason.
Yes.
Also, when you said it's funny how these games all have like a community, I thought you were going to say it's funny that all these games are non-Euro thematic. There's an area, or maybe there is at the top spot. But, the Mage Knight board game is just epic. Like the mechanics involved in it, Vlada Chavatal, who put it together, is just a genius in my eyes. The fact that he did this, and Through the Ages, the board game, which is my favorite multiplayer game, is just staggering to me. There's both just 10 out of 10 games. And Mage Knight probably does suffer as a multiplayer game just because of the length of time it would take you to play through a multiplayer game. I've only played a handful of multiplayer games over the years of Mage Knight, but I have played at least 100 solo games of it, and every time I break it out, usually months have passed by in between, and there's a whole thing where I've got to try and work out what ice resistance and fire resistance and cold fire resistance and all those different things do. But every single time it's set up, it looks beautiful, it plays brilliantly, there are so many compelling decisions. It's almost not a thematic game because it's so brain burny. You're not really focused on the fact that my Mage Knight is exploring this temple, or discussing with these villagers. You're just trying to work out a hugely complex equation to solve each turn. But luckily, it's full of beautiful art and really interesting abilities and monsters, and traveling around the different hexes and charting your course across the map and leaving a trail of destruction in your wake and putting your shields all over the map to show what territory is yours. So satisfying. And then to have the final conclusion where you have to single-handedly take out entire cities filled with doomed defenders is amazing, and all of the different abilities you can pull off. And there's always that moment where you're just staring at the map and you're staring at your cards and you're like, how the heck am I going to solve this? How do I take out this dragon? And then suddenly it comes to you. If you turn that one and power up that one and use this gem and that mana, and there's just so many different aspects to it that you just pull off these killer moves that just make you feel like you're playing it in God mode or something. But,
yeah. That's I think that's what we like about Euros generally, isn't it? When you get to there's a Cole
killer combo turns.
Yeah, and Cole of Root fame, he said to me something like most Euro games do this thing where you're starting up an engine, it's warming up, and then just as it's at its very hottest point, that's when you pull the plug and the game ends.
Yeah,
and that's I think that's what you just described there at the end of Mage Knight. There's that huge thing where you're like, I understand every part of this machine. Brilliant, yes, brilliant, and we're done. Brilliant, perfect.
It's a brilliant description.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so capturing that moment is like I think a game designer's ultimate goal, isn't it? Just getting a player to feel so elated about pulling off a move, or so frustrated that they missed out by 1 point on being able to take out a city, or whatever frustrations might emerge from not being able to complete the game. But,
yes, we will have the like Eurogamer's regret of not having done something 3 turns ago.
Now your engine's just staggering to a stop because you failed to get enough hay or whatever.
Exactly. Okay, so I guess we've only got the top spot.
Top spot. Okay, so this is probably a little more left field for most people. Is Warfighter, the Special Forces card game.
I don't know. I don't know this one.
So this is by DVG, who specialise in Danverson games, do all kinds of Tiger Leader and games where you're recreating. You're either a submarine or an aeroplane flying into Vietnam, or and very much sort of war-focused games. And as a kid, my dad raised me on Men on a Mission movies like Where Eagles Dare and The Dirty Dozen and stuff like that. And there's a huge place in my heart for a group of soldiers, impossibly outnumbered, behind enemy lines against overwhelming odds. And I read a whole bunch of those SAS books growing up as well, like Bravo G0 and stuff like that, about just these guys tackling impossible situations with guns. And so Warfighter is weirdly, I was designing my own game based on a squad of soldiers being dropped behind enemy lines and having to move through a theatre of conflict and achieve mission goals. And as I got sort of quite far into the design process, and that Warfighter came out, and I got hold of a copy, and I was like, this is everything I wanted to design, and immediately abandoned my own game because I only design games if they don't already exist, kind of thing. And this one just did everything I wanted to, but even better. And it's kind of, it's hard to recommend to like people who aren't as into that sort of theme as I am, I think, because it sends you into conflicts against like drug cartels in South America, or into Middle Eastern war zones and things like that. And so some people might disagree with it on a political level or whatever, but essentially you're playing as a squad of either Navy SEALs or SAS or Spetsnaz, super soldiers kind of thing, who are going on these missions to destroy missile launchers, and you're threading your way through a jungle or a desert or Eastern European city terrain to take on waves basically of soldiers or terrorists or bad guys and blasting your way through them. And it's a kind of a game in 2 parts. The first part is equipping your team. So you have a bunch of points, you spend them on the right soldiers, the right ammo, the right grenades, GPS trackers, drones, whatever sort of gear you want to take with you on this mission. And then you drop your dudes onto the first card and you move through a series of locations to get to the final objective and try and overcome it in a time limit. Are you still there?
I am.
Looks.
Sorry, no, I was just absorbing all of that.
So yeah, so it's very.
I love that. I love that started with, I'm not sure how to recommend it to people, and then you had to check whether I was still alive or not.
Just the gentle sound of snoring in the background.
It does sound very good.
No, it is. It's interesting. I mean, you know what? The graphics aren't great. The artwork's not top tier. But the game plays dice rolling. You know, you're playing cards to boost your dice rolls, but ultimately it comes down to shooting at guys, rolling to see if you hit them, rolling to see if you injure them or kill them, and managing whatever ammo and resources you have along the way, and sneaking, and calling in a sniper to take out an enemy RPG team in a building opposite you, and things like that. But it's like an action movie. It's like that Chris Hemsworth Extraction, that movie on Netflix, and which is you're either of the mindset where you would just never watch that type of film, or you'll watch it with a bunch of popcorn and just be like, it's rollicking, great fun, and Warfighter just provides that experience in game form, and it does it so well and so proficiently that I can play it endlessly. And it's got a campaign mode which isn't in the base game. It's not even that great. I'm really not selling it. It is my number one game, but like at the end of each mission, you roll a die to see what changes in the next mission, and it makes it slightly harder. So it's not like a huge sort of narratively immersive campaign, but there are scenario booklets for it which sort of embellish that a little more, and the combination of different objectives, missions, and groups of bad guys and groups of good guys, and gear that you can take, skills that you can equip your team with, all of the different combinations of effects that roll into the game, and just tick so many boxes for me, and just provide that action movie experience in a really lovely package.
That sounds great. There is the thing that we all do, which is when we talk about our favourites. I find this really hard when I review games that I love so much. This is a must play. I find it really difficult to articulate how good it is, and so I have to, and I also feel like I owe it to people to say there are a few little things.
Yeah,
and in the end,
it's the standard review mode, isn't it? It's like a compliment sandwich. Even if you love a game, you have to sort of say, but the bad side is this, and for me personally, it might not even be a bad side. It might not even be something I notice, or it might be something that somebody else has said in a forum, and I'm like, oh yeah, I could see how somebody else might not like that, but for me, it's not an issue. Because if you wrote a review and it just said must play, 10 out of 10,
it's completely perfect,
you just sound like a shill, and people would accuse you of that as well. So yeah, I get why you sort of not you personally, why people who review games.
I know it is me personally as well.
Just throw a bit as well.
Yeah, so shall we do the game that is going to be Position 0 for everyone?
Position 0?
Yes, beyond Position 1, which is your upcoming game.
Oh, well. It'd be wallowing in my own crapulence if I was to put my own game on a top 5 list.
Yeah,
but,
so in other people's lists, it might be making an appearance in the near future. So this is Veilwraith. This is a intended as a, I guess, solo only game, but you obviously can play it multiplayers with multiple copies of it. Would you like to sort of introduce it?
So, yeah, Veilwraith is my first game. Like all of our games have a solo option or can be played solo. Gloom of Kilforth specifically plays solo with one hero. We talked about that earlier, about inhabiting the role of one character, but also can be played multiplayer competitively or cooperatively as well. And that was all part of the design process. Whereas with Veilwraith, the latest game, I designed it very much as solo, and then realized it could be played multiplayer if each player had their own copy of the game. They can play it at the same time and then sort of interact with each other to either overcome challenges together or to race each other to be the winner, sort of thing. So it has that option, but I would very much pitch it as a solo game, because you would have to have more than one copy of it to play it multiplayer. And it is a game that's set after the end of the world. So a lot of like apocalyptic dreams about the world ending. And I blame James Cameron for having like some kind of nuclear explosion at the end of each of his movies when I was growing up watching those. But narratively speaking, it takes place after the end of the world of Kilforth from Gloom of Kilforth. You don't really have to know or be familiar with that game to understand what's happening here. But a cataclysmic event has occurred. The world has been destroyed. All colour and life has been drained out of this apocalyptic wasteland, and by an impossible twist of fate, you are a creature, the eponymous Veilwraith, that is sent back into this devastation to try and undo the wrongs that led to this situation. And in that respect, it's probably our most abstract game. Like, narratively speaking, it's out there. You know, it's not a sort of dungeon crawly adventure type game or anything like that. And it's quite puzzly, but hopefully quite thematic as well. So you are playing through a series of levels, or vignettes, as they're called in the game, where you have to explore this broken world and gather together the memories of what once was, memories of heroism, heroes that have died or gone before. And in this world that you're exploring, there are evil spirits have been sent by the being that destroyed the world. These spirits are being sent to stop you. And there are also other spirits that are trapped there. Either they have unresolved issues from their past lives. And so you're going around and trying to put some souls to rest and avoid the gaze of other powerful beings that are exploring this wilderness. And what that translates to mechanically is that you are playing a card game, which plays in about half an hour. And you are working your way through a deck of threats that are coming at you every turn. You have to use the memories that you have, your own deck of memories, to repel and defeat or avoid or collect all these threats that are being thrown at you each turn. And you have to find 5 keys to open a portal and escape to win a game. And if you do, you move on to the next scenario. All of the threats in the game sort of level up, they escalate, they have brand new abilities, and you can change your memory deck as you go as well. You can upgrade your deck between games to try and pare it down, make it more powerful to take on the new threats that you're overcoming. And so there's sort of a campaign mode as well, which means you could just play the base game, play the first vignette. You could just play that as almost like Patience and just rattle through it on your lunch break. Or if you were so inclined, you could save your game between games and come back to it and, you know, try the next vignette and keep moving up. You can play each of them standalone, or you can string them together as a campaign and sort of improve as you go. And I often find myself playing it for many hours at a time, going through many vignettes. And with the expansion as well, there are up to 20 vignettes that all have their own sort of unique abilities and enemies and foes who are like the big bosses in the game as well. So it's for me, I wanted to design a game that plays in about half an hour. So Gloom of Kilforth can take up an entire evening.
Yeah.
This is the kind of game where you can just sort of break it out and play it very quickly and by yourself. And it was, we had a big discussion about whether or not to launch it during the quarantine because of the various issues that people were facing at that time, and whether or not, you know, we should be putting people in a situation where we're asking them to buy a board game when they perhaps should be saving their money for food and toilet paper and all that kind of thing. But at that time, Frosthaven launched and made $12 million or whatever, and loads of other games were still going. And I wrote like an essay about the whys and wherefores of whether or not we should or shouldn't launch, whilst all these other games were just going right ahead. And it showed that there is still an appetite from, if anything more so, for people who, as we discussed before, who have been put into a condition where they're not able to play with their usual group. So we launched it with many caveats of, you know, please don't feel pressured. We'll keep the pledge manager open if you want to come in after the campaign, and there's no Kickstarter exclusives and all of that. And it became our second most successful title after Kilforth. So we've had huge amount of support for it. We're in the final stages of playtesting it now and submitting it to the printers, and hopefully going to deliver it to backers around Christmas this year.
It looks really good, and there's like that. I really like the sort of campaign play where it's kind of a sort of glacial pace deck building, isn't it?
Yes,
I think
we should put that in the box. Glacial pace. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and it's there's no deck construction element to it, so you just grab your deck and shuffle. But then between games, as you say, that you get to make an upgrade, and they're huge. They feel big. You know, the next time you play a game and that upgrade card comes out, you're like, yes. Yeah. And so by the time you get to the 20th vignette, that's what we're trying to make work, is that the game doesn't get rolled over by your killer deck, you know, or that it doesn't scale up so much that it's an impossible challenge. So trying to get that perfect fit that we talked about before, about, you know, either you just win or you just lose, is absolutely mission critical for me to get that right. But yeah, it's It plays quite simply as well. Sorry, there's not too much to think. You have a number of threats that come out each turn, and you can act on one of them. But you can use your card deck to make you able to act on more than one if you've got the right combination of cards and stuff. So there's quite a few decisions along the way, but it's not so overwhelming that it's you're going to be sat there for hours pondering each move.
Yeah, no, it looks really good, and it's one of those. When you described it to me last time we spoke, there's the element of you're going to go through your deck multiple times.
Yes.
So, one of the great thrills of deck construction games is that you really get to know your deck. This gives you obviously that thrill of really knowing your deck without having to actually have done like hours of working out synergies. Homework. Yeah. Which is also fun, but if you haven't got time,
it's different kind of fun. That's like the Lord of the Rings, the card game, where you have to. A huge part of it is building your deck beforehand, or even to an extent, Warfighter. It's probably not as complex, but you're building your characters before you go into the game. And there's a lot to be said for games like that, but I also like games where you can just pick up and play.
Absolutely.
Go.
Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to plug? Where can people find you? That sort of thing.
Thanks for having me. Yes, no, it's been great. Our website is wholeornothingproductions.co.uk. We have Veilwraith. We're still taking pre-orders for it, late pledges for that, and so that's going to be delivered at the end of this year. Our latest game, 1565 St Elmo's Pay, which is a history game about the Great Siege of Malta, along with the reprint of the first game in our history game series, 1066 Tears to Many Mothers. They're both on the boat from the printers now, so they'll be shipping out to backers in the next couple of months. And they're both beautiful card games. Every card in the game is based on a real person or character from history, and they play quite quickly as well, but it's one to two player competitive games that recapture these famous battles from history. And we have solo bot rules for those, so you can play solo, of course. And our flagship game, Gloom of Kilforth, and its sequel, Shadows of Kilforth, are available now through our website or through local game stores, and we're shipping out immediately if people are interested in those. Those are the big sort of RPG themed adventure games. Yeah,
absolutely. A recent podcast we did with Alex, a writer in the magazine. We were talking about like messy games that are really gonna take over your table. And we're talking about the anxiety of the Shadow of Kilforth and Gloom of Kilforth games, just because of the number of cards you have out, and if there was a strong breeze, you might lose your board slightly.
Not to be played outside.
No, not to be played outside. Absolutely.
But yeah, they're both table fights.
But joyfully, that was what we were saying. No, that's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening. Our intro music is Cloud Meetings by Body in the Thames, which you can find at bodyinthethames.bandcamp.com. You can find us on tabletopgaming.co.uk. You can find us on Twitter at tabletopmag, on Facebook as Tabletop Gaming Magazine. You can find us on Instagram at tabletop_gaming_magazine, and we've just launched a Twitch channel, which you can find at twitch.tv/tabletopgamingmag. If you like the show, recommend it to a friend, or subscribe to the magazine, which you can do on our website.